Hello, and thanks for joining us here on Encore. Coming up on today's show. Making moves towards more contemporary choreography as a new show opens at the Opera Garnier in Paris. From impressionism to abstract art, we take a look at how Monet's water lilies blurred the lines between movements in 20th century painting. And the youthquake that rocked France in May 1968, as seen through its political posters. We're starting at a monument to classical dance here in Paris, which is now opening its doors to more contemporary moves. The world-renowned Opera Garnier is hosting the season's Canon, a powerful and energetic piece by Canadian choreographer Crystal Pete. In it, an army of dancers use their perfectly coordinated bodies to communicate a message of harmony and interdependence. Erin Agunke has this report.
54 dancers move in unison. The group of bodies appears to mold into one unified form. A wave-like figure separates, divides into smaller formations, all before grouping back together into one again. The moving bodies alternate constantly between order and disorder, freezing before then collapsing like dominoes. They dance to the guiding notes of Vivaldi's Four Seasons, recomposed by the neoclassical composer Max Richter. Their every move, an expression of life.
The dancers listen to each other because there's a sort of rippling of their bodies, these ricochet movements. It brings out incredible strength and atmosphere. Producing such a high-quality piece required the dancers to listen to each other and to put in hours of work and reflection.
It may look easy, but the dancers have to be perfectly synchronized. Even the tiniest flinch could throw off the group's cohesion. The futuristic choreography is a signature of Crystal Pete. 2 years ago, the Canadian choreographer spent 4 weeks with the opera's dancers to fine-tune the piece.
She came to the studio with ideas. And depending on the person she was working with, she chose a movement. So the piece was really designed with us.
The season's Canon was an instant hit when it was created in Paris in 2016.
We weren't expecting everyone in the audience to stand up. I've been dancing with the company for 20 years. I'm part of the older generation, almost retired, and honestly, I've never seen anything like this.
At the end of the rehearsal, the audience was on their feet. Crystal Pete, the new shining star of contemporary dance, has returned to Paris. And Parisians are clearly happy to have her back.
Springtime blossoms usually only last a season, but these luminous plants have been immortalized in art history. Monet's water lilies have been called the bridge linking the naturalism of the early days of Impressionism and the most abstract contemporary art which was to follow. 100 years after Claude Monet captured the nuances of his Giverny pond, the Musée de l'Orangerie here in Paris is offering a new perspective on his work via examples of American abstract impressionism. Marie Berruyer and Wassim Cornet take a look.
This 100-meter-long circular painting represents the most famous pond in the history of art. People from around the globe come here to admire it. Monet's water lilies may be his most spectacular work, but it was also a lifetime obsession for the French painter. The year is 1915, and it's the only footage there is of Claude Monet in his garden in Giverny. Throughout the day, Monet captures the way the lilies change in the sunlight.
It was an open-air workshop. He was often here seeing and contemplating the effects of light and reflections.
In the last 30 years of his life, Monet created 250 versions of this painting. But with age came dwindling eyesight.
Monet became increasingly distressed. He had an incredible eye for details, so he was extremely worried about the fact that his eyesight may be altered.
The effects were obvious. In a few years, because of his cataracts, Monet's paintings became less sharp. And yet, at almost 80 years old, the painter managed to accomplish one final dream. He created a unique space at the Musée de l'Orangerie. 2 oval rooms, natural lighting, and a 360-degree display of water lilies. Visitors are completely immersed into the painting.
Forgive the tears. I've been dreaming of this day for about 40 years, since I was a little girl. Oui, c'est magnifique, Sir Claude Monet, je t'aime.
These blurry flowers led to criticism directed at the painter, but with those paintbrush strokes, Claude Monet, the last of the Impressionists, had just invented abstract art.
50 years ago here in France, a series of student protests snowballed to become what's now known as May 68, a full-scale youth revolt as massive demonstrations and a general strike brought the country to a standstill. The epicenter of this uprising was the École des Beaux-Arts here in Paris, which turned into a revolutionary workshop called the Atelier Populaire. It's where many of the political posters were designed and printed, and now the school's showing that work at the Images en Lutte exhibition. Catalina Marchant has the story.
Be young and shut up.
The fight continues.
Down with the hellish rates. We are the power.
50 years later, the revolutionary posters of May 1968 are still making noise. A historical heritage that this architect helped build. When the major strikes hit France during that year, he was only 18, a first-year architect student at Paris' School of Fine Arts. He put his printing skills to use and joined the revolution, creating many of the famous posters that led the rebellion in France.
I was just a soldier. In armies, you need generals and officers as well as soldiers.
All the images were produced right here, in the École des Beaux-Arts of Paris. During 46 days, students and artists occupied the school and turned it into what they called the People's Workshop, a real-life fabric for revolutionary messages. The painter Pierre Bourraglio was part of this unique adventure.
This huge space is where we held our general meetings.
The revolt was turned into images, and the General Assembly would vote for the best poster, usually reacting to the news of the day. From then on, the workers of the different sectors in strike all gathered at Beaux-Arts. It was where they would place their orders. The very politicized People's Workshop was at the service of the workers' struggles.
It's obvious that these posters and the words that you can read on the posters are less poetic, but there's a reality of suffering, of working conditions that were extremely difficult, of low salaries, etc.
Michelle Katz was also part of this workshop. One of her posters reached dozens of copies, inspired by de Gaulle's undercover police force. Katz believes that most of the designs still apply to today's struggles.
I think all the posters are current. All of them. Stay young and shut up is still relevant. I can't see which one isn't.
In less than 2 months, almost 1 million posters hung in the walls of Paris and its surroundings, making the uprisings of May 1968 a unique movement remembered through its art.
We're finishing with images of a more urban nature as the work of American photographer Gordon Matter Clark goes on show at the Jeu de Paume Gallery here in Paris. The exhibition's called An Architect, a reference to the artist's rethinking of the city space, and it includes examples of his films, printmaking and photos, many of which document the modernist landscapes of his native New York. We'll leave you with a small selection. Remember to check out our website for more arts and culture, and you can also keep up with Encore on social media too. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
This week, the African Development Bank annual meetings take place in Busan, South Korea. Forums will be held on the following theme: Accelerate Industrialization in Africa. Join France 24 for a debate on the economic links between Africa and South Korea and the future of African agriculture.
Don't miss this exclusive debate on France 24 and France24.com.